So imagine a town where the most prominent feature isn't like a towering cathedral or a bustling market square. It's actually a sound.
Right, just this constant noise.
Exactly. A deep, perpetual, rasping wheeze that just reverberates up through the cobblestones. Like a rusted bellows or, I don't know, the planet itself slowly suffocating.
It's such a vivid image.
Yeah. And that sound is a dragon sleeping in the cavern systems directly beneath the town of Millhaven. And that dragon is sitting on piles of gold 50 feet high.
It is a stunning, deeply unsettling auditory metaphor. I mean, the dragon's breathing acts as the literal barometer for the entire town's economy.
Welcome to today's deep dive. It is Monday, June 15th, 2026, and whether you are prepping for a high-stakes strategy meeting, trying to wrap your head around macroeconomic theory, or you're just insanely curious about how systems of power actually work, today's source material is going to completely rewire how you see the world.
Oh, absolutely.
We're unpacking a brilliantly layered allegorical text called Fabulist Economics by Max and Claude.
It really is a masterclass in using fantasy to deconstruct reality. Because the premise seems simple, right? A town suffocating under the weight of a hoarding dragon.
Right.
But Max and Claude use this narrative to perfectly model real-world economic crises, the nature of wealth, and how human beings adapt to seemingly impossible constraints.
And the scale of Millhaven's problem is just staggering. Like, according to the town records in the text, 472 years ago, the dragon arrived and demanded a, quote, reasonable tribute.
10 gold coins a month.
Yeah, 10 coins, which is not great, but manageable. But over nearly 5 centuries, that desire mutated into a totalizing pathology. The hoard now consumes the entire lower cavern system. We're talking millions of coins. The dragon spends 17 hours a day just sifting through it, moving gold from one massive pile to another.
And this is where the text introduces its first major economic premise. The dragon isn't evil.
Wait.
Yeah, it's not malicious, and it isn't experiencing greed in any recognizable human sense. It is simply a singularity of accumulation. It acts like an economic black hole, just exerting a gravitational pull on capital.
Wow.
In a dark, ironic way, the dragon actually solved the problem that has obsessed human economists for millennia.
Which is what?
The perfect concentration of wealth.
Right. It achieved total market capture. But here is the fatal flaw in that victory. By perfectly concentrating all the wealth in the caverns, the dragon eliminated the very thing wealth requires to exist.
Other people.
Exactly. Other people with something to exchange. The economy of Millhaven isn't just struggling at this point. It is dead. There's literally no money left to trade.
Which forces the town's hand. They have to try and restart the heart of their economy.
And that kicks off the first major attempt to fix the system. We meet Thomas Grieve, who is kind of the town optimist, and Margot Vess, who acts as Millhaven's default economist.
Right.
They go down into the dark, and they actually manage to negotiate a deal with this monster. The dragon agrees to release 10% of its current hoard.
That's 400,000 gold coins.
Yeah, a huge injection. But in exchange, the town agrees to a permanent 40% tax on all future trade.
Now, on paper, handing over 40% of all future economic activity sounds like a catastrophic deal.
It sounds terrible.
It does. But the town is starving.
Ugh.
They look at the immediate injection of 400,000 coins and think, this massive stimulus will save them, so they distribute the gold. And then
Synogamy stalls completely.
Exactly, it doesn't restart.
This part blew my mind because it feels so counterintuitive. If you suddenly inject 400,000 coins into a broke town, people should start buying bread, repairing roofs, hiring each other.
You would think so.
But they didn't. Why did it just freeze?
Because Margot Vess failed to account for a fundamental economic reality: the liquidity trap and the velocity of money. Money, by definition, only has value when it is in motion.
Okay, think of the velocity of money, like blood pressure in a human body. Having 400,000 coins distributed among the townsfolk is like having an adequate volume of blood.
Right.
But if the heart isn't pumping, if people aren't spending and trading that money back and forth, the patient still bleeds out. The economy still dies.
That is a perfect analogy, because the townsfolk of Millhaven had just spent decades watching their economy suffocate. They were deeply traumatized.
Oh, right.
So when they finally got their hands on a few dozen coins, they did what any terrified, economically insecure population would do. They didn't invest it. They didn't spend it. They hid it under their floorboards.
Wow.
They created a micro-hoarding crisis in every single household. The velocity of money just dropped to zero.
But the text doesn't just stop at the economic stall. It explores the sociological fallout, and it is brutal. Because what I initially didn't grasp was why getting money back into their pockets immediately triggered a wave of violence.
Yeah, that's a dark turn.
You would think capital brings a level of stability, right?
Yeah, it does, but only when capital is protected by a functioning, trusted system. When you have extreme scarcity, it breeds fierce competition. And when competition lacks a regulatory framework to mediate it, it invariably devolves into violence.
Which is exactly what happened.
Yeah, the text illustrates this with a tragically specific incident. A man named Patrick Howe receives his emergency distribution of 230 coins. He hides them.
Under the floorboards.
Exactly. A neighbor figures out he has them, breaks into his house, and Patrick is literally beaten to death with a farming tool trying to defend his floorboards.
He died defending the very idea of property over just 230 coins out of a 400,000 coin stimulus.
And that single murder changes the entire trajectory of the town. Because the capital was hidden and because people realized they now had to violently defend their meager savings, power abruptly shifted.
It moved away from the money.
Yes, it redistributed away from those who possessed capital directly to those who possessed the capacity for violence.
Which paves the way for Marcus Thane. He's this opportunist who rises up and creates a quote-unquote security militia. It's pitched as protection, but it's basically a mafia protection racket. The townsfolk are paying armed men just to keep their hidden coins safe.
Exactly. It demonstrates a terrifying economic principle. When a formal system breaks down, the consolidation of power in the vacuum creates a new dragon. The town itself was becoming the monster they were trying to survive.
And nothing changes until a completely different perspective enters the cavern. Enter Alara, a 9-year-old girl who tags along on the next delegation.
This is such a pivotal moment.
It is. Because while the adults are arguing about tax rates and distribution logistics, Alara asks a question no adult had dared to ask. She asks, why does the dragon hoard? What does the gold actually accomplish sitting in the dark?
The dragon's response is one of the most chilling lines in the entire text. It looks at her and says, it achieves itself. The hoard is the purpose. I hoard because I am a dragon.
It's just absolute raw nature. And that is the massive breakthrough for Margot Vess, the economist.
Yes. Margot realizes she has been treating the dragon like a rational economic actor. In traditional economics, a rational actor maximizes profit until they reach a point of satiation. A point where they say, I have enough.
But the dragon doesn't have a satiation point.
No, it is a force of nature. You cannot reason with a river. You cannot negotiate a peace treaty with a mountain.
So Margot realizes they have to completely flip their economic model. They have to build their entire society, assuming the dragon will always take 40%.
Right.
She calls it competitive extraction. They have to generate so much excess value that the town can survive on the 60% left behind.
And this requires a massive shift in psychology for the people of Millhaven.
Well, wait, I want to push back on this for you listening right now, because this is where the text gets incredibly frustrating. Isn't this just a fancy rationalization for surrender?
It can definitely feel that way.
If a hurricane is bearing down on your coast, you don't just shrug and say, well, that's weather, and let it flatten your house. Why give up on trying to slay the dragon, or at least fight the tax rate?
That is the exact tension the authors want you to feel. But the distinction Margot makes here is vital. There is a massive difference between surrender and accommodation.
Okay, unpack that.
Surrender is giving up entirely and letting the hurricane wash you away. Accommodation is accepting an immutable constraint so that you can engineer a way to survive it. You don't fight the hurricane, you accept it exists, and you build your house on stilts.
Ah, I see.
By accommodating the dragon's 40% drain, the town gives itself permission to build the dual system.
The dual system. This is where the economics get really fun. They split the economy. Above ground, you have the official system operating at a 35% tax rate.
Which is heavy.
Very heavy. It handles large formal trades, mostly agricultural staples and real estate.
Yeah.
But below ground, operating in the shadows, is Roland Vess's informal merchant network, which only taxes at 15%.
And the merchant network only functions because of a brilliant innovator named Sarah Chen. Because the dragon physically possesses all the actual gold, Sarah Chen creates unbacked credit ledgers.
She basically invents
A fiat currency.
Yes. She invents fiat currency.
Exactly. Fiat currency is essentially a collective hallucination. It has value because everyone agrees it has value. Sarah Chen's ledgers are based entirely on mutual trust among the merchants.
And that changes everything.
It lowers the barrier to trade so significantly that commerce explodes.
But here is the paradox that had me scratching my head. The dragon is omniscient when it comes to gold. It knows about the shadow network. It knows Roland is only taxing at 15%. So why does this apex predator tolerate a black market operating right under its nose?
Because the dragon doesn't care about human governance and it doesn't care about tax laws. It cares about the absolute mathematical value of the hoard.
Okay.
By allowing people the choice between a rigid formal system and a flexible merchant network, the town's overall economic productivity skyrockets. Lowering the tax barrier for smaller merchants unlocks frozen capital and incentivizes risk-taking that a flat 35% official tax would completely strangle.
Oh, right, because more productivity means more total wealth is generated.
Exactly. And 40% of a massive economic pie is physically larger than 100% of a dead economy.
The math checks out. The dual system works, and it pulls Millhaven back from the brink. But as we all know, no solution lasts forever. We fast forward 25 years. Alara, the little girl who asked the dragon why, is now 34 years old. And she sees that the dual system is failing.
It has succumbed to institutional calcification.
Which means what exactly?
It is the natural life cycle of almost all bureaucratic institutions. They form dynamically to solve a pressing crisis, but over decades, their primary objective subtly shifts. The goal is no longer to solve the problem. The goal becomes maintaining their own structure and authority.
The rebels became the new tax collectors.
Exactly.
The merchant network became just as rigid and exclusionary as the official system it rebelled against. Both of them are now actively suppressing new informal traders just to protect their market share.
So Alara descends into the cavern again. She proposes a 3-year trial of a 3-tier system to the dragon. Tier 1 remains the official system at 35%. Tier 2 is the merchant network at 35%.
Okay.
But she introduces Tier 3, a newly legalized gray market specifically for small, informal traders operating at a simple, frictionless 5% tax rate.
This feels so relevant to today. It reminds me of the battle against digital piracy in the early 2000s, or like the rise of the gig economy.
Oh, for sure.
If the legal route is impossibly expensive and wrapped in red tape, people will just operate in the shadows. But if you make the legal route simple and cheap, like a music streaming service for a few bucks a month with a great interface, people voluntarily come out of the shadows and pay into the system.
Exactly.
Alara's gray market essentially legalized the side hustle. And structurally, it works. The text notes that total town wealth grows by an incredible 12%.
It does. I mean, a 12% boost to GDP in a heavily taxed, constrained environment is a monumental achievement. But this is where the text delivers a devastating critique of aggregate economic data.
Oh, this part is wild.
Because when Alara actually sits down and looks at the ledgers, she experiences intense vertigo.
Wait, hold on. 12% overall growth sounds like a massive win. A rising tide lifts all boats, right? Are you telling me that growth actually hurt people?
That is exactly what the text argues. A rising tide only lifts all boats if everyone actually owns a boat. Otherwise, the tide just drowns the people standing on the shore faster.
That is such a good way to put it.
The 12% overall growth was a statistical facade hiding a terrifying reality of massive inequality.
Let's break down that math, because it is brutal. Alara sees that the wealthiest merchants in the official system saw their individual wealth grow by 25%.
Huge gains.
The middle-tier merchants in the network grew by 8%. But the poorest traders, the people in the gray market who generated that 12% boost with their sheer volume of labor, their wealth only grew by 3%.
The 3-tier system wasn't fixing the underlying inequality. It had merely become a much more sophisticated, efficient mechanism for extraction. The wealthy were using the cheap labor and low barriers of the gray market to subsidize their own exponential growth.
And the dragon knows it. When Alara returns to the cavern, the dragon actually mocks her. It says, "You have created a system where everyone is exploited equally."
It's a gut punch. Alara realizes that simply creating tiers of taxation doesn't protect the vulnerable from the powerful. It just organizes the exploitation.
So she is faced with an impossible task. She has to figure out how to address this massive, accelerating inequality. But, and this is crucial, she has to do it without creating some oppressive, centralized government authority to forcibly redistribute the wealth.
Right, because they already learned from Marcus Thane's militia that centralized power just becomes a new dragon.
Her solution is elegant, and it introduces the fourth tier, the gift economy.
I love this concept.
Explain how it works in Millhaven.
What's fascinating is that the gift economy had always existed in the background. You know, neighbors helping neighbors fix a roof, farmers sharing excess crops with a sick family. But it was entirely invisible to the formal economic metrics.
It didn't count.
Exactly. Alara doesn't invent it. She simply creates a recognized framework for it. She establishes a registry of community needs and a registry of available gifts.
And it is completely untaxed by the dragon because it isn't trade.
Right.
It is mutual aid. It is unrecorded unless people choose to record it.
Exactly. And the genius of the gift economy tier is what it provides psychologically. It provides dignity. It provides social capital for the wealthy merchants who choose to give back. And it provides sheer survival for those in the gray market who receive.
And all without the bureaucratic shame or rigid control of a centralized welfare state.
Right. It weaves a safety net out of social fabric rather than tax revenue.
But, as Max and Claude remind us, no system escapes the pressures of time and competition. We jump forward another 30 years. Alara is now in her 70s, and the ultimate economic collapse finally hits Millhaven.
Right. And this time, the catalyst isn't the dragon. It's external. Neighboring towns that do not have a dragon sleeping under them have finally built up their own robust economies.
Which introduces a massive macroeconomic threat, capital flight, and regulatory arbitrage.
Precisely. If you are a top-tier merchant in Millhaven, looking at a 35% official tax rate plus whatever the dragon takes, and you look over at the town of Ashford, which has no dragon and a 10% tax rate,
The math becomes very simple.
you pack up your enterprise and you leave.
So the official system completely collapses because its entire tax base physically relocates. Millhaven loses its biggest economic engines, but miraculously, the town doesn't die.
Because of the multi-tiered groundwork Alara spent her life building. The rigid top tier shatters, but what emerges from the rubble is an incredibly resilient, decentralized ecosystem.
You still have the merchant network facilitating medium-scale trade. You have the gray market, keeping the microeconomy fluid. You have the gift economy, ensuring no one starves. And finally, they formalize the commons, the shared, collective management of natural resources like the river and the surrounding forests, preventing anyone from monopolizing survival necessities.
It is an economy that no longer relies on a single point of failure. It is an economy that has finally learned to exist organically alongside its supreme constraint, rather than constantly trying to enforce a rigid top-down order against it.
Which brings us to the epilogue. And honestly, this might be the most philosophically mind-bending part of the entire text.
It really is.
We meet Miriam, who is Alara's 13-year-old great-granddaughter. She's looking at the ledgers and she notices a statistical anomaly. The dragon is voluntarily taking less than its mandated 40%.
It's fluctuating.
Yeah, sometimes it takes 35%, sometimes 38%. So Miriam goes down to the cavern to investigate, and she finds the dragon deliberately moving mountains of gold around to create vast empty spaces in the middle of its hoard.
When Miriam asks why, the dragon explains that over the centuries of watching Millhaven evolve, it has discovered the difference between mindless accumulation and conscious accumulation.
Wow.
It realizes that a hoard with no empty space isn't actually a hoard. It's just a dense, dead mass. The empty space gives the gold definition.
Okay, I have to stop here because this is the hardest pill to swallow in the whole allegory. Are the authors seriously asking us to believe that an apex monster suddenly developed a conscience after 500 years of suffocating a population? That just feels like a fairy tale ending.
I completely understand that reaction, but it's crucial to distinguish between the terms here. The dragon did not develop a conscience, it developed consciousness. The text is very explicit about this. The dragon tells Miriam, "I have not stopped wanting more, I am still a dragon." It hasn't suddenly become altruistic, but it has become aware of its own nature and the nature of the ecosystem it relies on.
And if we look at the meta-notes included by the authors, Max and Claude, they explicitly state that the dragon represents The fundamental, immovable constraints of our reality.
Right.
Depending on your perspective, the dragon could be absolute physical scarcity. It could be the relentless compounding nature of global capitalism. It could even represent the inescapable limits of the human lifespan.
And their ultimate point is this. You cannot defeat fundamental constraints. You cannot slay mortality, and you cannot permanently slay scarcity.
But the twist is what happens to the constraint when you change your relationship to it.
Exactly. As the dragon proves, when a complex system like the town of Millhaven stops throwing itself fruitlessly against its constraints and instead learns to adapt, decentralize, and build profound resilience around them, the constraint itself can evolve.
It's forced to adapt.
Yes, the dragon changed not because it was defeated, but because the town changed how it existed in relation to the dragon. The ecosystem forced the apex predator to adapt to a new equilibrium.
Wow. Let's just take a breath and recap this incredible multi-generational journey. Millhaven started as a dead, suffocating economy. A terrified population hoarding scraps, tearing each other apart with farming tools over a few hundred hidden coins.
It was grim.
Very grim. But through brutal trial and error, they evolved into a deeply complex, multi-tiered society.
They built an official system, a merchant network powered by fiat trust, a frictionless gray market, a compassionate gift economy, and a shared commons.
They learned to thrive not by finding a magical sword to slay the beast, but by adapting to the long shadow of a 40% drain. They engineered a way to live with the monster.
And that is the ultimate piercing takeaway for you, listening right now. Look at the architecture of your own life or your own business. Just like the people of Millhaven, we all operate under systems, rules, and constraints that we did not choose, and frankly, that we cannot defeat. We all have our own dragons sleeping in the basement.
And as this story shows us, every solution eventually just becomes a new problem. The dual system saved them, until it turned rigid and bureaucratic. The three-tier system spurred incredible growth, but created devastating inequality.
There's no permanent fix.
No, there isn't. So maybe the goal of life, or economics, isn't to build a perfect system that lasts forever in some frictionless vacuum. I want to leave you with this final thought to mull over today. As you look at the dragons in your own life, those massive, unmovable constraints, whether they are financial, physical, or systemic, that you fight against every single day. What if true freedom isn't about finally slaying the dragon? What if true freedom is choosing how beautifully, how creatively, and how resiliently you can build your life in the empty spaces it leaves behind?
We can't always change the sound of the breathing in the dark, but we have absolute agency over how we live above it. This has been a remarkable text to unpack.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep listening to the breathing and keep building in the spaces.